Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. So in this video I want to talk about the transition I made from two-part to a calcium reactor for my 187 gallon tank. But before I do that, I just want to remind you to sign up for my newsletter. If you do, you get 15% off one order of SPS Frags. I will put a link in the video description below. And also please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Alright, with that said, let's get into it. So it's been about a month since I switched from two-part to a calcium reactor on my established 187 gallon SPS dominant tank, and I wanted to provide an update in terms of how that transition has gone. And as you can see, I have a Reef Octopus single chamber 9-inch CR220 calcium reactor with the Varios pump. I also have the dual chamber Reef Octopus calcium reactor on the new system, so I will certainly be interested to see how the pHs compare once that tank, the new tank, has a lot more corals in it. So I wanted to try out the single chamber. Anyway, it was actually a pretty rough transition at first. The media that I initially used inside this reactor is this stuff, the CaRx arm course media. I'd been using this for years and years and years on my 225 gallon tank that I had back in Connecticut, very successfully. Loved the media. I think it was crushed coral, but apparently they changed the formula a number of years ago, and what I found is that the pH set point in terms of being able to actually melt and dissolve the media is a lot lower than what I was hoping. I actually had to crank it down, that pH set point, all the way down to 6.1 to get it to dissolve. But while I was trying to figure out that that pH set point, my alkalinity dropped a lot. You know, it had been in the mid, I don't know, 8.5 range for a long time using the two-part, but it dropped all the way down to 6.8 to the low 7s for a number of days while I was trying to figure this thing out in terms of what that optimal melting point would be for the media. So the only thing I lost, and I'm really bummed out about it, is my Unique Corals original strawberry shortcake colony. That was the only thing that perished in the tank. So I guess that's, you know, a fortunate thing. I was lucky. I didn't lose more. But, you know, hey, that's the way it goes. You live and learn. So I ended up replacing the CaRx arm course with the Two Little Fishies reborn media, and that stuff is great. The melting point that I've been using on that is 6.5, and so just for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the melting point, I have this pH probe in the calcium reactor, and that pH probe is set right now to 6.5. So when the pH gets below 6.5, the carbon dioxide shuts off, and you know, that's a big part in terms of how I'm trying to hit my target alkalinity. And right now this target, the alkalinity in this tank has been pretty rock solid at 8.5, which is where I like to keep it. So one of my initial big concerns when I was contemplating switching out from two-part to a calcium reactor, and the tank was consuming a ton of two-part, up to 300 mLs per day of each part. So, you know, I was concerned that my pH would drop a lot when I added in a calcium reactor because I'm injecting a lot of the carbon dioxide. So before I made the switch, my pH was in the 8.1 to 8.4 range with two-part. And, you know, I think also a big part of why my pH was elevated, you know, two-part, it's going to be more elevated because you're not injecting the CO2. I did add in an air exchange unit back in the winter time, and I think that helped a lot. Nonetheless, I was still concerned about making the switch from two-part to a calcium reactor. So one thing that I did to help offset that is I ran the effluent line from the calcium reactor, which is going through this Chemours peristaltic pump, and I made sure that that line was close to where, and it's very hard to see right here, close to the intake and where the skimmer pump is. So it's right now dripping straight down into the sump where the skimmer pump is. So the theory there is that you want to have a place where you can degas the carbon dioxide that's coming out of the calcium reactor through the effluent line. And hey, what better degasser to have than the skimmer, because there's a lot of air exchange going on inside that chamber. Now, another change that I made is using Kalkwasser, and I want to thank my buddy Chris Meckley at ACI Aquaculture. He gave me this idea, and so far it's been working great. And what I have here is a 30-gallon drum. I'll take the lid off here. And inside this drum is Kalkwasser, and you can kind of see at the bottom, I don't know if you can see the sediment or the slurry of the Kalkwasser, but it's down there at the bottom. And here's the interesting thing, and I didn't realize this is something that you can do with Kalkwasser. I always thought that it needed to be stirred to make sure that the solution is fully saturated, but according to Chris, you do not need to do that. The sludge or that sediment, as long as you have the sludge or the sediment, that solution is super saturated. So I do not do any mixing. I've been not doing any mixing. Whenever the RODI water drops off on this, getting down to the low point, I just top it off. So that's really kind of like the only mixing that's going on, is when that RODI water is getting low. Nonetheless, what I'm doing here is I'm using my GHL dosing pump. I've got 2 dosing heads that are actually pulling from this mixing bin, and I also have my the 225-gallon tank. I've got 2 dosing heads that are also pulling from the tubing that's strung along the top of the door around the side here from this 30-gallon drum as well. So this drum is serving 2 different systems, not only the 187-gallon tank, but the new 225-gallon tank. Anyway, I am pulling the and dosing from this container with the 2 peristaltic dosing heads right here, and I wanted to use 2 different heads because I didn't want to overwork, you know, one of each of the heads in this dosing pump. So each head is pulling 1,800 mLs and dosing to the sump per day. So in total, I'm dosing 3,600 mLs per day on this system. And listen, you can't argue with the results right now, because of all the things that I've been doing in terms of having the effluent line drip right near the skimmer pump intake, plus dosing the Kalkwasser, my pH, when I was using the 2-part, has jumped from 8.1 to 8.4 as a high to now, actually it was 8.0 to 8.4. And so now the pH with the calcium reactor online is 8.1 to 8.5, which is great. So it actually has gone up 0.1 pH point, which is pretty decent amount in terms of the swing upwards. So I'm really extremely happy. Not only did it not go down, but it actually went up a tick. One other point about this setup I have for Kalkwasser, I'm not saying that Kalk reactors are unnecessary. I've used Kalk reactors in the past with great success. They're got a very small footprint, so if you don't have the space for a big drum like this, you know, obviously you want to have a reactor where you could fit it inside your cabinet or right next to your tank. But for me, I'm trying to dose Kalkwasser to about 500 gallons of system water. So I really needed a solution that could handle that volume. Now, a couple of more points in terms of what I did to make this transition between 2-part to a calcium reactor. I measured alkalinity a lot, often, to try to get a good benchmark in terms of how things were changing when I made the switch. I also did not play around a lot with the effluent flow rate. You know, it's now at about, actually at 50 mLs per minute, so I didn't really monkey around with that too much. The bubble count, you know, that I got going on here is, I don't know, 70 to 80 bubbles per minute. So really it was the pH set point that I was tinkering with to try to lock in the desired alkalinity for the tank. But you definitely have to be careful, take things slow, measure a lot, and just be careful. And when my alkalinity did get down to the 6.8 to low 7 range, I did dose the alkalinity from the 2-part to raise it up, because a calcium reactor is not going to be the most effective tool to raise up the alkalinity a lot. So I definitely course corrected and did some more additional dosing to try to up the alkalinity, and it certainly worked. The calcium was pretty much in line in like the 420 to 430 range, so I didn't have to make any adjustments there. Well, that will do it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I also want to remind you about my premium SPS frag store on reefbum.com. I will leave a link in the video description below. I will also leave links for my equipment store. I do sell GHL, Royal Exclusiv, and Bellum equipment, as well as Reef, Octopus, calcium, and Kalk reactors. Many of these products I do use personally on my tanks. Until next time, be safe and be well. Later.
We'll be right back.